After 13 years in business and many successes and failures to learn from, we have come together to create the Biz Hackers Show. Join us on our newest venture as we bootstrap our way to millions, sharing our biz hacks along the way. Welcome to the Biz Hackers Show. I'm your lead biz hacker, Chris Lee. What's up, everybody? Welcome to the Biz Hackers Show, episode number 8. Today we have a special treat with guest Trevor Chapman. Take a listen in. Hey, everybody. Welcome out. Today I'm super excited. Going to be featuring one of my really good friends, Trevor Chapman. If you guys don't know about Trevor Chapman, this guy is absolutely unreal. He's done incredible things in both the marketing realm and as a business owner. Trevor's been featured on Inc., Entrepreneur, Fast Company, The Next Web, Money, CNBC, Yahoo Finance, and the Huffington Post. He is known as a global thought leader and has done incredible. His experience comes both as a business owner and as a marketer and as an investor. His experience is 10 years. He helped grow businesses that he owned to over $100 million in sales. Along with that, he took and applied the same experience that he had in the door-to-door realm and brought it to the internet, and where he's been extremely successful in e-com and where he has been featured in the majority of these publications. Trevor, dude, welcome out, my friend.
Chris, thanks, brother. I appreciate it.
Dude, so good to have you, man. So let's just jump into this, man. Tell us a little bit more of your story. I know I gave you an introduction, but I want to give you the chance to really explain what you got going on and really what brought you to the position that you're at right now.
Sure, man. Well, let me start a little bit back. You know, the best way to understand the present is to view the path traveled. So, excuse me, I got strep right now. I may cough from time to time, but I grew up on Guam. My dad was a scuba diving instructor. Every day, you know, after school, I was on the boat with him. The summation of my entire desire in this life was to be my dad's deckhand. And life was good. But when I was 12 years old, my family decided to move away from Guam, which for me was heartbreaking. For them, it was something they wanted to do. I was one of 2 white kids at my school. So, you know, it was one of those situations where America was viewed as this imperialist nation that came in, stole the land. And, you know, I take no sides on that. But as a result of that, you know, kind of grew up in the rough neck of the woods there. Anyway, we moved to Alaska, and out there he was a whale watching boat captain. So there's one thing that whale watching boat captains and diving instructors have in common, and that is a really low salary. So you live your passion, but you don't have a lot of extra revenue. And so, you know, we grew up, just the family was a team, you know, and we all contribute. And so during the summers, I started off selling sand dollars. What's that?
Go ahead. Sorry.
No worries. So during the summers, I would, I started off selling sand dollars to the tourists on the docks. Anyone who's been on a cruise ship to Alaska knows, you know, you pull in and line up to get back on the boat, etc. And that was all right. And I stepped it up a notch and started to play my saxophone on the docks. And when my family saw that I could match what I was making, it was, you know, more or less assigned as a chore. And so, you know, those who know my story and know this story, but for those who don't, I think it kind of illustrates it well. A few years back, we were at a family reunion on my wife's side. And, you know, so this little conversation, what was your least favorite chore growing up? Mowing the lawn, pulling the weeds, doing the dishes. And I thought, man, my least favorite chore growing up was waking up before the sun came up so I could beat fish and game down to the estuary, catch 36 salmon, my family's limit every day, get home, gut them, smoke them, can them, and then by 2:00 make it down to the docks to play my saxophone. And it's funny because back then I saw it as an impediment to the life that I wanted to live. I played every sport until it came time to pay for the jersey. Then I had a good reason why that year I couldn't, but it was good because it honed me in areas that allow me to exceed now. In fact, if I could wave a magic wand and go back, there's absolutely nothing I would change. I remember wondering why I wasn't a trust fund child, and now it's the thing that I'm most grateful for, was the circumstances financially of my childhood. When you wear your buddy's shoes that he had the previous year and his name are on the bottom, eventually you have to decide, am I going to allow these material things to define me, or am I more than the shoes I wear, more than not having an Abercrombie and Fitch shirt? And so eventually I just decided to own it. And in fact, it's funny in retrospect, my senior year, I just didn't let anything affect me. And so, I was on the school board, the only student actually on the school board, ran for the school board and won. Student body government. My classmates thought I wore the same shirt to school because I loved, the way it looked, and that I wore my dad's pants because I loved the way they sagged. This is back in the days of baggy pants, and what I understood but couldn't verbalize at that point in time was that perception was 100% malleable, that I was able to influence others' perceptions of me. And instead of them saying, oh, wow, he plays the saxophone on the docks because he's poor, they thought he's rich because he plays the saxophone on the docks. He wears that same shirt to school because he's poor. He wears that same shirt to school because he just doesn't give a flip. And it astounded me that what was in all actuality something I had no control over was perceived as intentional. And I kind of carried that forward. Fast forward now, 21 years old, going to school, fall in love, know that I have to make it rain. My uncle says to me one day, he's like, her dad's a multimillionaire. You got to do something, man. And I had a buddy, and he said, come out, knock doors, pay for school. So I decided to give it a shot. Went out to California, and I excelled. There was an element to the fact that the one sport in school that you didn't have to buy a jersey for was debate. And so I was in debate. There was an element of that involved. There was an element of all kinds of things involved. But the one thing that if you would have taken away, you could have taken away my debate years, and it may not have made much of an impact in my results. The thing that impacted my results the most were that if the team worked 5 hours, I worked 10. If they worked 6 hours, I worked 12. I just knew that the only thing that I had that they didn't was a commitment to, look, the time's going to go by. This day will pass. And so I can spend it. What's my ultimate goal for the day? Now I will do everything I can to achieve that ultimate goal. And at the time, no kids, no wife, no family. Why would I just sit around, watch a movie or play video games if that day would pass and I would be in no better of a place? I'm not dissing relaxation. Sometimes I'm accused of relaxing too much. But I also focus in equal portions. One thing leads to another. I realized that as a sales rep, there's a lot more money on the table. Start a pest control company. 2008 rolls around. I've got multiple offices. We moved to Florida because my plans at the end of that year, which was to be my greatest year yet, was to buy a sailboat and go hang out with my best friend, Richard Branson, on Necker Island. Little did he know that he was my best friend, or that we were going to be hanging out together on his island. And as you know, 2008 came with catastrophic results. For me, it just decimated everything, including my own self-confidence. Dozens and dozens of employees, tens of thousands of customers. I learned two things that year. First was that I was in the accessory business. Accessories are things that people cancel when money gets tight. And I needed to be in a necessity business without stepping away from my core competency. So instead of saying, oh, hey, look, we're knocking doors to sell this, let me go be a computer technician or, a bank teller because that's a necessity. I said, how can I stick with what I know right now and transition to necessities? And then the other thing was that I found that in an attempt to change the results, I was adding and complicating life. My to-do list was becoming ever longer. A to-do list that I already wasn't completing. And I decided to take a different approach, and that approach is this. I've summed it up more or less in this sentence. Anytime that you want to make lasting change, you start by asking yourself the question, what will I no longer tolerate? So you make a not to do list. What will I not tolerate? And that kind of changed everything. For the sake of time, I'm not going to go into the stories behind it, but I've got some tear jerkers in there and some heartstring tuggers, as anyone who struggled has. And those helped shape me. Kind of fast forward, I'm now from Florida in California. A few businesses later, I'm in commercial security because by law, these companies have to be fire monitored. My office neighbor is the largest digital content producer for Apple and the only digital content producer for Android and BlackBerry at the time. It was called Pixel Mags. He was the first person to take magazines and make them digital. And chatting in his office, he was kind of like this mentor figure that I had at the time, that I had placed him as. He had no clue. And he said to me, hey, do you do access control? And I said, the security kind of access control? And he says, yep. And I told him that we did, and that there's nobody better in the state to choose than us. And he said, well, bring me a bid tomorrow. I told him I would, walked back to my office, jumped on my computer and Googled, what is access control? And that kicked off a series of events. A year later, we were awarded Access Control Integrator of the Year in LA County. And one thing led to another, which led to another. And, I found myself working with the country of Israel, the only American to partner with them to bring the Iron Dome over, the software at least to stop school shootings. I was able to interact with the Blank family from Israel, cousins of the Blanks that started Home Depot, eventually sold that to them. And a few years ago, identified, after maybe 6 months of semi-retirement, that solar was an opportunity that I should not step away from, because there was a lot of revenue. And once someone has solar, they've got it for 20 years or more. And so it is a temporary gold rush, and that now is the time. And so I jumped into solar how I jump into everything. I don't like to have competitors. And so I find a way to make myself useful to all of my would-be competitors. And while there were hundreds of sales organizations, there were very few people that installed. And those that installed typically didn't speak sales lingo. So I positioned us as the fulfillment arm for all kinds of sales organizations. That allowed us to grow rapidly. And with a philosophy that I have, which is there's only two value adds inside of a business. One, you are either measurably moving the needle forward as a high producer, measurably moving it, or two, you are supporting at the highest levels the highest producers who move the needles forward, accounting, admin, etc. And if you're not in one of those two categories, then you're slowing everybody else down. And it just so happened that I felt that what was happening in my marketing department. They said, hey, we need more money. What do you need it for? Online stuff. Why? SEO, SEM, PPC. And it dawned on me, these guys are engaging in query-based marketing. They're waiting for somebody to want what we have. And if we do that, it's like you and I going to Amazon and searching for toothbrushes. We'll both buy the highest quality toothbrush at the lowest price. Human nature. There may be a couple exceptions to that rule, but again, those are exceptions, and we don't cater to exceptions. We cater to the bill. And so, I understood that my competition was Elon Musk. This dude spent $3 billion, made $1.5 billion in return, and he's Elon Musk. Every dollar he spends, he gets 50 cents back, and he's Elon Musk. And so if I compete in his arena, there's no chance I can win, because for me, that's bankruptcy. For every dollar I spend, I have to make 2 or 10 or 100. So I said, look, I'm going to take a minute and try to figure out this whole online stuff. I watched every YouTube video I could find, threw up a website a week later. I was in solar, so I started selling solar batteries and solar chargers. Broke $1 million in 92 days, 2 million 90 days later. And 8-figure sellout at month 12. For me, that's significant because I had found that I was at a state in life where I was doing it for the money. I was not doing it out of passion. And I was telling myself that I was passionate about enterprise, that I was passionate about creation. And while that's true, an artist still may love painting and then tell himself, well, sculpting is still art, and then take the commission work, to sculpt something even though he hates it. And I find that I don't live well in that arena. And so it was kind of like a way for me to escape what I was in that I did not want to do. Anyway, since that time, a lot of things have blown up. About maybe 4 months ago, Harvard Business Review wrote something and said, speaking of me, today he's considered one of the greatest experts in digital marketing in the world. And that is only because I approach everything I do online as if I'm knocking on a door, going screen to screen. If I knock on your door, Chris, and try to sell you solar, even though you probably already have it, if you don't answer the door, when I come back and knock on it again, I don't say, all right, buddy, you win 15% off. You're like, 15% off what? I don't know what the offer is. Or if I'm in your house and I can tell that, and based on your reaction, I see that you have an issue with the cost or the return policy or where it's manufactured or whatever, I will answer that concern and attempt to resolve it and then close you again. But online, very few people do this. There's very little segmentation based on the customer situation. We just skim the surface level, that stuff that's easy to chew. But where the real meat is down below. And so all I've done is just approach screens as we approached doors. And because the internet was so new and so easy in the past with not a lot of noise, it was easy to just gather the low-hanging fruit. And now that the low-hanging fruit is gathered, and it takes more effort to climb up the tree, fewer people are climbing, but those that do kind of get noticed. So that's my story in a nutshell, man.
Dude, such a good story, man. Thanks for sharing that with us. It really amazes me how much of a similar background both you and I have. Both grew up poor, working from a young age, providing for ourselves. Having to provide a large portion to our families. Door to door background, failure in business in 2008 because of poor decisions, economy, however you want to, term it. And then, entrepreneurs in all different ways. Like I love that being able to connect with you and, have someone that really understands what I've been through, and so it's really a pleasure to have you on here and be able to ask you a few questions. And so with that, got a few questions for you, my man.
Let's do it.
So what is a new belief or behavior that you've adopted in the last 5 years that has most positively impacted your life?
Yeah, that's easy because we know things verbally, or what I mean by that is we can recognize a truth, but we often exclude ourselves from that truth. What do I mean? This is what I mean. And it's funny because it's even newer for me than the last 5 years. And this might be interesting to some people who know me, but I'm only now really starting to understand this. And that is this. I knew that I could be whatever I wanted to be when I grew up. I knew that, right? Because everyone tells you that. I wanted to be an astronaut. I wanted to be this. I wanted to be that. But I couldn't really be anything. I could have been a dive instructor. I could have been a boat captain. When my parents found out that I wanted to be on TV, they said, okay, we'll be a weatherman, And so I think that I subconsciously limited myself very much, even though I knew the adage, you can be anything that you want to be. And it's only been recently that I recognize that, wow, it truly is the case. I believe if you would have said, hey, Trevor, can you be president of the United States? Yeah, anyone can be anything. But we always look at ourselves differently because we know our own, we should at least be our own worst critics. And
right.
We know we're critical of ourselves. And so, yes, we can be anything that we want to be, with the caveat that, well, within reason. And, in the last little while, I've seen this to be true. And it's funny because I've seen it. It's been the example of my kids that has actually shown me this. My son recently, I want to give them, a life that is very similar to my childhood in the sense that they don't grow up privileged, but that they're able to experience whatever they want without, without restraint. So if he wants to play soccer, he plays soccer. If he wants to play football, he plays football.
Right.
And he's been doing that. But I haven't seen him light up. And he climbs with me around the world and all this stuff. But he said, hey, I want to be an actor. And I said, okay. And so we started jamming. I got him, like a supporting role on a movie. And when we were there, I saw him just absolutely light up. And so I said, okay, let's take it a step further. And he was scouted by an agency actually in Seattle, not far from you. And they took him out to New York for the largest model and talent search competition. And he swept it. And then he got a manager and agents. And dude, it's crazy.
So
and it's
awesome.
all, it's been in like the last 120 days. And so you can drastically, anyone can drastically change their lives fundamentally. Yeah, I used to spend, my success door knocking was because of only two things. One, before I would go out, I had a very specific routine, and part of that was listening to The Richest Man in Babylon. For whatever reason, that book fired me up, and it made me forget about all of the reasons why not to knock, and it reminded me of all the reasons to knock. And then number two was The 17 Laws of Success by Napoleon Hill. And having been indoctrinated with thousands of hours, and I mean thousands of hours of that, I started to believe certain things that I had never considered prior. I remember when I asked my wife's dad how he started his business, he said, well, I bought it. I said, how much was it? $3,000. I was like, where on earth did you get $3,000 from? He's like, it was just in my account. And I'm like, what? How would you have $3,000 in your account? This is me, 21, 22. I could not conceive of someone just having an extra $3,000 in their account. It just simply did not make sense to me. Just as they say the Native Americans, when the first Europeans arrived, could not see the ships, the large ships on the ocean. They couldn't see them. They saw the small ones coming in with people. But at least if you believe some of the reports, they literally, their minds were drawing a blank. They did not see the ships. It was an island. It was this or that. It wasn't a ship. And that's only recently started to change for me.
That's awesome. In what way or role have mentors impacted your life?
So it's a double-sided coin. On the one hand, I see and I was involved in mentor worship for a long time. And the problem with mentor worship is you take someone and you think they're perfect. And when they turn out not to be perfect, then you lose anything that you could have gathered from them. And mentor worship is like even worse in this digital age where you've got people running around with 20 million followers and they only post the best aspects of their life. And you're like, wait, my life's supposed to be a highlight reel. And if it's not a highlight reel, then there's something wrong with me. So I remember specifically, I had two mentors that I had placed myself as mentors. And I remember and this is going to sound ridiculous, and I want to stop my own younger self for even saying this, but I remember when they quote unquote disappointed me, that I was like, okay, freak, I'm not going to have any more mentors because they're all human. And so it was good and bad. It was bad in the sense that I stopped trying to find people that I could learn from. And I started to just learn from books and, or continued to learn from books, but ramped it up. Mentor worship is like this weird thing that's like very common now. We treat these mentors like they're titans and demigods, and they're not. They're like you and I.
Right.
And many of them, didn't even earn that position. It was either given to them or, it's different. That highlight reel is not real, and my highlight reel is not real. Neither is yours. What everyone perceives as being an authentic life is not. It's completely different.
Right.
And so my first thing is, beware of mentor worship. On the other hand, I have, in the past many years, absolutely, once I got over that thing where I was like, okay, I'm not gonna have any more mentors, then I really sought them out on whatever level they were willing to communicate with me. Never once did I say, be my mentor. Chris, it's funny. I remember the first time I got an email that was like, will you mentor me? And at first I was just like, holy man, I've made it. What is this? And then it's gotten to a point only because of the highlight reel. These people don't know me in real life. They don't know if I'm a jerk. They don't know who I am. But I probably get 5 or 6 emails every day at this point, every single day saying, will you mentor me? And I wrote to a kid yesterday. He's a 15-year-old surfer. And he reached out to me on Instagram, asked me the same question. And I said, there's something that you got to realize, man. I'll give you better than quote unquote mentoring you. I mean, how do I even do that? You're in Hawaii, I'm here. But first off, nobody ever wakes up and says, okay, cool. Warren Buffett never wakes up and says, all right, on my list today, find someone to mentor. I mean, he's got things that he's jamming, things that he's doing. You know, no one who's actually, Jeff Bezos has no time to mentor anybody. But what he does do is lay the groundwork for you to follow. He blazes that path. So instead of saying, I want a mentor that can hack my way, follow their path, just watch what they say. The first guy that really did it for me was Andy Blake. He has no clue. And if he ever listens to this, shout out to you, Andy. But he partnered with us on Sarah, and Sarah was the Israeli, software it was the Iron Dome, basically. We called it Sarah, School Emergency Response Application. And I remember when they required him to show his bank account. I knew that people had $100 million net worths, but I did not know that people just had that kind of money sitting in banks. And it blew my mind. And I learned so many things from him without him officially being a mentor that I owe so much to. And anytime that I'm in New York, Park City, or California, I text him and say, where are you at? This is where I am. Can I take you to lunch? And if we're ever in the same city, he agrees. And I've learned 2 things, actually, that's interesting. Compared to him, man, I'm just a poor, road bum. But he has never paid for dinner, my friend. I always pay. And I learned so many things about how to manage money. I always offer, and he always says thanks. And I thought, anyway, so yes, does that kind of answer your question? I've got so many more people that I interact with here and there.
No, for sure. And mentors, mentors are available in so many different facets, right? Like you got books, you got podcasts, you got Facebook, you got Instagram, you got, people in your direct network, you got, there's so many different ways to access mentors. And I love what you're sharing as far as like hacking their path, seeing what they're doing, replicating. Now, so that's one level. And then,
can I add something real quick?
Go
Chris?
ahead.
Yeah. So one thing here, for me, it kind of came full circle when people that I had set up as mentors privately without other people knowing came to me and said, hey, we want to do business with you. This was Ryan Davies. He's the CEO of Kierza. He's a partner at Clark Capital. He's Mitt Romney's nephew. And Dewey McKay. He was the COO of MX, the largest banking software on the planet. And I had been working with them on other projects. And when they came and said, hey, Trevor, we want to partner with you. Like we literally want to go into business with you. And that was a humbling, ego inflating moment for me because these men are far my superior. And it was their approach to me. And let me tell you why. Because I added as much possible value to their lives as I could without any expectation in return. I have this thing that I call contribution-based marketing. And it's marketing yourself, but it's all contribution-based. I've been on now the cover of entrepreneur.com maybe a dozen times. And that all came about because I was reading Entrepreneur one day. This has nothing now to do with Ryan and Dewey, but the message is the same. A magazine came out, Entrepreneur, and I read the editor's, page or whatever, Jason Pfeiffer. And he talked about how he started to add people on LinkedIn who were adding him, not treating it as a Facebook friends social network, but as a networking event, assuming they're business cards, and that he was starting to respond to people's direct messages. And I said, okay, freak, I got to do this before everyone else on the planet reads this. So I added him and sent him a message that said, I noticed that you have 2 podcasts. I have a podcast and it's a top 10 podcast and I did it in 2 months. Let me show you how. So he wrote me back and he kind of vetted me a little bit back and forth. And then we jumped on the phone and I spilled all of my secrets to him and just any value I could add. It wasn't like, oh, here's value 1, here's value 2. It was very conversational, but I told him exactly what to do, exactly how to do it, and then I did it for him to prove it. His exact words were, "You blew my MF mind." And then at the end, he said, "Okay, what can I do for you?" And I was like, "What do you mean?" He's like, well, what do you want?" I was like, "I don't want anything." And there was like this 20 seconds of silence, and I refused to break that silence because I wanted it to truly sink in for him. He's like, "Wait, you don't want an article?" I'm like, "No." He's like, you don't want us to profile you?" I'm like, "No." He's like, "Well, usually when people reach out to me, they want something." I'm like, "No, man, I saw that you had a podcast. I have a podcast. Thought you could have value from it." He's like, "All right, well, thanks." And that was that. A couple months go by. I have an idea, and I pitch it to him. And he says, "I like that idea. Come out to New York and let's film it." So we came out to New York, filmed it, and then someone put me in touch with the special projects director there, and it got greenlit and pushed to the front of the line because the editor-in-chief saw that I was contributing without any expectation in return. Flew out there again. This 4-part series went up, and then I said, "Hey, I would." And then my very first ask was, "You are not maximizing your stories. Let me maximize other people utilizing your stories as shout outs." And he said, "Sure, you have exclusive rights to it." This is as of like a week ago.
Wow.
I said, "Cool." And then he said, "Hey, I'm going to hold a retreat. Can you help me with this? This is something you've done I haven't done before." I was like, "Absolutely." So we went from being completely just polar opposite worlds, not knowing each other, to this dude's actually my friend. And it's not, some staff reporter. It's the editor-in-chief of Entrepreneur Magazine. And I have replicated this dozens of times. I did the same thing with Russell Brunson, and I've talked extensively about this. Unfortunately, I believe that most of those people are, again, mentor worshiping. And so the way that they interact with him is as one would interact with a demigod. And people just are not demigods. They are not. And I don't know if it's my pride or what it is, but I just can't treat someone like a demigod, man. It's really hard for me to do. And it's probably my pride. Maybe I should be able to. But I said, I need to get close to this guy. He's figured stuff out that I haven't. So I said, how do I become one of 100, not one of 60,000? Join his inner circle. Cool. Did it. Now I'm one of 100. So what do I do now? I watched what everyone else did. They, asked questions nonstop. So I said, I will never ask a question. I will only provide value. And so I saw things that he questioned, didn't know why. I found the solutions too. And every time I went out there, I just provided value. I just, opened the kimono and said, this is how I'm doing what I'm doing. Since then, I've been to ClickFunnels multiple times at his request to teach his staff or other people things I'm doing. And, I finally did an ask. Finally, after all that contribution, hey, will you make a testimonial video? And his secretary and his partner said, our attorney has said we can't make any testimonial videos. And so I said, well, I'm not going to ask them though. So I went straight to Russell. I was like, hey, will you do this? He was like, sure. Sent me, a 5-minute testimonial video that is excellent. And it was all because of contribution-based marketing. And these are all people that I would have had as mentors that instead of saying, okay, now teach me, old sage, all of your mysteries that you've spent your life learning and open them to me. And let me hack my path so I don't have to go through all the pain that you've gone through. Yes, I've been waiting for someone to ask me that all my life. Come over here, fly out here, let me mentor you. Instead of taking that path, I just say, hey, if there's any way I can contribute, I'm going to. And I don't ask permission. I just give them the knowledge as quickly as I can. And it always comes back 100-fold.
So awesome. I think that right there, that contribution-based marketing is probably one of the biggest value adds that you can bring right here to this conversation. I think that is something that can be applied so much. I mean, in this world where we're all about take, right? I mean, so many of us just want to go and take the information from everybody else, like you said, instead of going and giving of the actual value that we have and not treating these people like demigods, but providing them additional value. And in return, it always pays a 10x result. Like that. That's phenomenal. Thanks for sharing that, Trevor. How much,
100%.
Dude, how much are you spending a year on your personal development? Through
hundreds of thousands of dollars.
Okay.
The best thing I ever did was join any group of people who had more experience than me, more connections than me, more knowledge than me. That's the best thing I ever did, is join those groups. Without that, very little, very, very, very little could possibly ever happen. And
When did that change for you? Like, when did you
so
start spending that kind of money, and like, what were the immediate results?
it was around that Andy Blank time when I first met him. I was asked to speak at ISC West about Israeli technology. And all of a sudden I was like, dude, there's this whole echelon in this industry, like the legit part of it, that I have no clue about. And so I started to do anything I could to help these people. You know, Andy Blank, I have probably done $100,000 worth of work for him, absolutely for free. Earning his respect and trust so that he will have lunch with me and then answer all my questions as I pick his brain. But it really started to take off once I got online, because masterminds and conferences, etc., are a real thing. Like, and online, you know, people recognize that. I think it's because you can make so much money so quick that dropping 25 grand or 15 grand or 5 grand is something that people are like, well, I'll make that today, so I'll do it. And so I think it's very pervasive here, and it's not pervasive in the regular world where you're struggling trying to make ends meet. That is, if you want to, when someone who is of mentor status offers to open the kimono to a select number of people who are willing to pay whatever the price is for that, that is a one-way ticket to the shortcut that you are looking for. And you should take those every single time, because it is, you will never have that access to anybody. Some people will be like, oh, they should give it away for free, blah, blah, blah. And that's just simply not the case. The people that say that have never been through the grind. They've never known what it costs to get there. They don't know the emotional toil, the familial toil, the physical toil, the tears, the blood, the uncertainty, all of the above. They have no clue. And someone is willing to show you how to get by that, to literally warp space and time and shortcut your ability to go from point A to point Z for a small sum of money comparative to the 10 years, the decade, the 2 decades, and all of the turmoil that they had to go through to get there. That's a steal and a half.
You know, for the longest time, I struggled forking out the big money for those type of things. Like, it was always like, yeah, go get the free book, borrow the book, rent it at the library, you know. And several years ago, I made the switch. Okay, I'm going to start buying my books. I'm going to pay for the actual things I receive. I'm going to get on Audible. I think I've been on Audible for like 6 or 7 years, or however long it has existed. And that was like, you know, initial investments in myself. And then I started, you know, forking out, you know, $1,000 here, $1,000 there for a conference, or, you know, going to, you know, some of these retreats or experiences or masterminds or whatnot. And it wasn't really, it's so interesting how much our income is really tied to what we invest in ourselves. And for the longest time, I thought investing in myself was just that, you know, read some books, talk with occasional mentors, go to a few conferences. But the reality is like you're saying, there's people out there where you can warp time. Like, you can take everything, their whole life invested, and get it in a very, you know, fast paced environment, you know, in 6 months, 12 months or less. And, you know, it's been interesting as I've forked that out, and I've spent crazy amounts of money, you know, $50,000 for a group, $100,000 for a coach, you know, this, that, and the other. And like, as I've done that, it's like completely changed my life, and not only changed my life, but my income level, into the fact that, like, I have all this knowledge where people are now coming to me. I mean, I run my own coaching program. I do my own courses. I do those different type of things. And basically I'm sharing all the knowledge, all the hundreds of thousands of dollars that I spend year in and year out in personal development. And I'm able to provide it to these people for a fraction of that cost. And it just makes so much sense. And for me, I can never go without a mentor or a coach anymore. Like, it's absolutely insane I think in the digital age that we live in, where there's so much information out there, why bypass? Like, why not bypass the time and the effort by going and figuring out those nuggets? Like you said, these guys that are willing to open up and share with you that experience, and that's been life changing for me. And I appreciate you sharing that.
Let me jump in real quick if you're cool.
Yes.
I was out in Croatia recently at one of these things, baby bathwater, and two things occurred. Number one, I felt like I had found my tribe, which one thing that nobody ever tells you when you sell a business is I never understood. I read Richard Branson's autobiography, Losing My Virginity, and he talked about he had $1 billion check in his hand, but he was running down the street bawling. And I was like, dude, you have $1 billion in your hand. I kind of get it, but I mostly don't. And I, multiple times now, have suffered an incredible sense of loss because everything that you've been working on, most importantly, the human connections, when they're gone, it's almost like a death, a voluntary death. And so finding your tribe again is very incredible. However, that is just a side note. While I was out there, I presented on engineering results. And this dude was just in the back of the room. And he waited while everyone else was talking to me after my presentation, like most people do. And then he was the last one, and he walked up and he said, "Hey, man, dude, that was incredible. I wish my kids were here to hear that. My name's Jamie Wheel." And I freaked out because this guy wrote a book that is phenomenal called Stealing Fire. And he runs the Flow Genome Project, the CEO of it. And I could not believe, number one, that this dude, so much my superior in every way, stayed afterwards, talked with me for 20 minutes, and then stayed in contact with me. I had him on the podcast recently.
Awesome.
And what he shared on the podcast was 30 years of academic toil and research, and he just gave the final conclusions. You don't have to go and figure it all out. You don't have to go through all the testing. You don't have to go through, you don't have to go and get your doctorate and all this stuff. You just get, bam, here's the end result. And that's the exact same thing. And so, that is, so the two sides of the coin are when you go out there, you find someone that you want and you're like, hey, mentor me. Instead of saying, hey, here's all these things, instead of saying, hey, here's 10 ways I can help you. Which one do you want? You just say, hey, I did this for you. Just because, no reason. You're awesome. I appreciate your stuff, blah, blah, blah. That's one way. But the more effective way, because it has almost results guaranteed, are finding the person who's already willing to show you, who's willing to warp space-time and let you into the fold. And typically with that, you gain their network, and that has unspeakable value.
Oh, I mean, networks. It's hard to put a price on a network for sure. And so, man, I appreciate all the knowledge that you've shared with us today, dude. Number one book you're reading right now, or that you'd recommend?
Yeah. So, Stephen Pressfield, I love him, and I love his story in its entirety. He wrote, amongst many books, The War of Art, which he's probably most famous for, but he's written a bunch of fiction as well. He just came out with a new one. I believe it's called The Artist's Journey. So, and in it, he extrapolates on the hero journey. The hero's journey, every Hollywood film, in fact, you and I, we've lived it. It's like this thing that's, our DNA requires us to live our own version of the hero's journey. But he says that once you arrive at the end of the hero's journey, what starts next is the artist's journey. So Odysseus goes through all these toils and everything. He finally gets back home. He has that thing. He comes walking into town. He's got the oracle. And now what? Does it all end? No. Now that's when the artist's journey starts. That's when Rome gets built, after the hero's journey. And so once you get through the hero's journey, that's when it's time to pour nos in the tank and really jam. And he eloquently puts it together. However, having said that, the book I recommend to everyone is A Guide to the Good Life, The Ancient Art of Stoic Joy. I read that book a couple times a year.
Awesome. Number one product under $100 that impacts your life daily and you can't live without.
Ooh.
Tough one, right?
It is. I'm trying to think, and like I'm completely drawing multiple blanks. Let me think here.
It can be over $100
yeah,
if
here it
necessary.
is. So I hate carrying wallets, and as a result of that, I never have my cards on me until I found this wrist band. I love things on my wrists, and this wristband has a little slit in it to carry my cards. And so I have tan lines in the shape of my cards because they're on my wrist all the time. And I use it every day.
Awesome. Where do you get that at?
I have no clue, man. I bought it probably 10 years ago when I was just, my wife and I were going on a trip to bum around South America or something like that. And I bought it so that my cards would be close to me. And probably at REI, but I don't know.
Awesome. Well, hey, man, I appreciate you jumping on here. If you guys aren't following Trevor on social media, it's at Trevor Chapman. Is that correct? On
Either
Instagram?
at Trevor Chapman or at J Trevor Chapman.
Okay.
Jason. Yep.
Awesome. At J Trevor Chapman. Also, if you aren't listening to his podcast, it's the Trevor Chapman Show. Absolutely stunning. The guy has over 1 million downloads every single month. Content is real and stuff that you can actually take and apply, turn revenue, change your life. It's absolutely incredible. I appreciate you, Trevor. Thanks for jumping on today, brother.
Thank you, Chris. Love you, man. Chat soon.
See ya.
Thanks again for joining us on the Biz Hacker Show. If you're not subscribed, be sure to do so now. For more great tips and biz hacks, visit us at bizhackertools.com. That's bizhackertools.com. Until next time.